Anisha Sabroyan, welcome to Brand Growth Heroes. How are you doing? It's halfway through the week. How's your week going?
Yeah, it's going really well, thank you. I can't believe it's already Wednesday. It's always flying by.
And you're working from home today, I see.
I am indeed. I'm in the office.
In the office, very nice. So listen, we're really delighted to welcome you as the first pet food brand on Brand Growth Heroes. And when I was doing some background research to try and understand a little bit about the category, I found myself absolutely mind-boggled by the complexity of this enormous category full of, huge amounts of competitive activity. And I thought to myself, my God, this woman is a genius, because I know you're doing really well and you're going to tell us just how well you're doing. But how you navigate that, I just don't know.
I remember first creating the whole competitor context and making a grid of, where do we stand? And the grid got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I realized there's way too many competitors out there. That was overwhelming.
So it'd be really interesting to talk a little bit about that. But before we do, one of the things we always do on Brand Growth Heroes is tell us what you are, what Scrumbles is, where to find you, what it looks like, so that people who don't know the brand, listening from anywhere in the world, can imagine that in their heads as we talk through the rest of the conversation.
Perfect. So we make recipes for cats and dogs, and they centre around digestive health. So use natural and gut-friendly ingredients like probiotics or slippery elm. We talk about pretty poos a lot.
Okay.
As pet parents have to inevitably pick up poo, and it's a really good tell of the health and well-being of your cat or your doggy.
Right.
Central to our brand is having a positive impact. So we became the second pet food brand to certify as a B Corp.
Okay.
And we also donate 1% of our sales to environmental causes as part of 1% for the planet.
Wow.
So we strongly believe, we talk about good health starts in the gut and good food shouldn't cost the earth. Those are our two founding beliefs. And that means not just in price positioning, obviously more premium ingredients or environmental packaging has a higher cost. Otherwise, everybody would do it. But we focus on our price positioning so that we're a super premium pet food at a premium price point.
Right.
And we take conscious decisions, so whether that's manufacturing locally to reduce our food miles, using plastic-free compostable packaging or recyclable packaging to avoid landfill. And we work very closely with the University of Bath, investing into life cycle assessments so that we have a really good understanding of our impact and we can make informed decisions to reduce that.
Okay. And one of the things I was swatting up on was, are people trying to reduce, and I don't want to go down into this rabbit hole, but just, are people trying to reduce the amount of meat that their dogs or cats eat? And you've got an amazing set of explainers on your website, which, by the way, I love your website. It is really simple. There's so many very, very detailed and quite overwhelming websites out there for pet food. But you were saying on your website that you don't use red meat, you just use chicken and pescatarian and fish diets in order to be more sustainable, but still give the animal what they need. Is that right?
Exactly. So our pets don't realise this, but Scrumbles is a Apollo pescatarian-friendly company, which means
Apollo pescatarian.
Poultry and fish, because it's got a lower emission. We avoid things like dairy, because you can find dairy in a lot of pet food, and that's got an even higher emission environmental footprint than, say, things like chicken. But we also do look at plant-based diets. So it's not good for your cats who are obligate carnivores, but for doggies, when it comes to treats, they can actually eat carrots and things like that. So we, after our life cycle assessment, developed a plant-based dental treat, which is our number one selling product. And it helps you minimize your pet's paw print, as we like to call it.
Okay. And I understand as well, a really interesting thing from the category data, that people spend 50% of their spend on pet food is actually on treats, certainly in dogs.
Particularly during the pandemic, we've become very generous treaters.
Wow.
And I think that's even more so true for the younger generation of pet parents. We tend to show our love in treats. Yeah. So we talk about guilt-free snacking a lot and making sure that we give our pets low calories.
So two things I'm thinking there. I'm thinking less price sensitivity in treating your dog because of the higher emotional connection. Yeah. Or the emotional burden or weight because you want your dog to be happy. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
So tell us about Pretty Poos. And I know that Pretty Poos is where all this started for you, isn't it? But can you talk to us about competing on gut health and pretty poos and how all that came about and where that puts you in the category?
Yeah, so I've always grown up with pets, and I had my doggy Smudge right after university. But when me and my husband moved in together, we wanted to get a pet baby together. So we rescued our little kitten Boo, and had all sorts of problems with her. So some gory details I'll spare you from.
Oh no, go on. We did no, but honestly, this is what this is about. Like, just go for it.
Well, we have some very crude conversations with some of our customers about poo, and some of them do send us pictures, which I'd rather them not.
Yeah.
We had explosions in the litter box, and kitten poos particularly smells really badly. It takes over the entire house. So we knew that we had to sort it out, and went back and forth to the vet, and we were prescribed what's known as the poo prescription, which is probiotic paste. So you put the probiotic paste onto their food, and it completely cleared all of the problems. So she went from explosions to a beautifully formed poop. And
I know people who need that.
And there's actually it's the Bristol stool chart. It's the same for humans and pets. So what a good poo should look like.
Yeah.
It needs to have a moist film around it. It needs to be
God. Okay, no, this is too close to breakfast. I know you said you were going to go into detail.
There was a time during the development of Scrumbles where if you went through my phone, you would just see poo pictures, because we had all of our kind of friends' pets sending us daily pictures of the poo so that we could see where we were doing. So
does that mean that from day one, you knew that this is how you wanted to compete? Did you see a gap in the market for this? I mean, when you as an owner had all this explosive poo issues, what did you say to yourself? What was the click? Because your background is FMCG and food and brand. So your head must have been going that way as well as oh God, I've got to sort out the poo situation.
Well, what's actually really funny is we were focused around gut health, but we didn't realize that was our focus. So we were doing this to develop a recipe that worked well, by our cat and doggy. Yeah. We didn't realize that was what was unique about us. And it was only once we were forming the design, Jack and I really thought about speaking to millennial pet parents, because that was the gap that we'd identified. Nobody was really talking to us and looking at our pets as how we see them, as our little babies. And gut health was part of the recipe, but it's as we worked with our design partners that we realized that, well, actually, that's really what's defining us and distinguishing us from the competition. So we made that more prominent on the packaging and talked about it a lot more.
Okay, and it is a fabulous positioning. I was actually doing a brainstorming with there's a pet food company who isn't really out in the market yet on my course at the moment, and we were doing some brainstorming before I was even talking to you, and we were talking about all of the pain points for owners, and the first thing that came out was having to pick up poo and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that everybody feels. So you came out onto the marketplace then in what year?
So we launched June 2018, 2 years after starting the journey. We thought it'd take us 6 months to get to market, like any naive founder, and realized actually there was a lot of different things that we had to sort out. So it took us a little bit longer, and we worked for other companies consulting whilst working on Scrumbles in the background.
So even though you have been at some of the world's finest FMCG companies, and I'm talking Procter & Gamble, I'm talking L'Oreal, I'm talking who else? Unilever, you still didn't realize that it was going to take you 2 years instead of 6 months.
Yeah.
What does that say for people who've never worked in the industry before? There's a really big learning there, isn't there, for everybody?
It really is. And I think everybody expected us to succeed from day one because of our background. And that terrified us, because you only know what you know, and you just don't know all of the unknown things about starting a business. So I've learned more in the past 2 years, or 3 years, should I say, than I did in my 10 years at all of those places.
Okay. So you've mentioned Jack now. So you and Jack started this. Who is Jack?
So Jack's my best friend and husband. Aww. Who has worked with me before. So we briefly worked together at Unilever and almost worked together at Innocent. But I went to L'Oreal instead.
You went to L'Oreal instead. So he's your doggy daddy.
He is, yeah. Or cat daddy.
He's your cat daddy. So you're a cat person. Okay. And so you and Jack work together. You're both the founders. And so we haven't yet said, so 2 years ago, you came on the market. What are you doing now in terms of market sales values?
So last year we closed at £2 million. This year we should deliver between £6 to £8 million.
That's amazing. And where are you listed? Where can we find you?
Everywhere online. So you can find us directly on scrumbles.co.uk. We work with retail partners, Amazon, Fetch, Ocado, Pets at Home. And then in the pandemic, we launched with Sainsbury's. That was our first foray into the grocery world. We've since expanded our range with them and launched into Whole Foods and Wilco alongside local pet shops.
What proportion of, and this is putting you on the spot maybe, but what proportion of dog food in the UK is bought through major mults versus through online? Or
it's changed dramatically during the pandemic. So the grocers used to hold between 50 to 60% of the share. Online has dramatically taken over. It's really hard to get a read because IRI don't pick up Amazon, but we know that they have about 50% of the online share, and that's the fastest growing area.
Just Amazon themselves?
Just Amazon alone. They are a beast.
Oh, so they have 50% of online, and then online probably has 50% of all of it at least.
Yeah, about 10 to 20 of the overall, I would say.
Oh, only 10 to 20. Okay, so does that mean that grocery retail has the rest of it?
So you have the specialist market, which is where most of premium pet food can be found. So those are your independent pet shop chains. So Pets at Home, they have around 10% market share, Pets Corners, and then there are a number of pet chains and the veterinary and breeder side.
Now, the reason I'm asking those questions, they might seem detailed, but yesterday I did a webinar for people on how to scale up your operations as your business grows. And one of the things we do when we're doing that exercise is we brainstorm all the buckets of jobs to be done. Right. And then we brainstorm breaking those down. What are all the micro jobs to be done? And then we say, what are the skill sets and knowledge and capabilities required to do those jobs? And the reason I'm asking you those questions is I'm thinking, okay, if I was Anisha, what skill set and knowledge and capabilities do I need in my company in order to compete really well in those different channels? And then how do I allocate my resources accordingly? So have you had to learn to, how to sell online and how to sell to specialist stores, whereas before maybe you were in the grocery retail because of your big company experience? Or what have been your big learning opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, so grocery's definitely always been the bread and butter of my career. It's where I feel most comfortable. I've never sold directly before. So starting up the DC side of the business was a really hard learning, how to get people to know that you exist. I've learned a lot about SEO, and I enjoy the geeky side of analysis. So I think that I've become quite good at it. So if you search those kind of purchase intent keywords, Scrumbles tends to be on the first page of Google for them, and we monitor it very closely. Amazon has been a fascinating retailer to watch. I remember when I started my career, it just didn't really exist. And now it's the big threat to all of the supermarkets. It's really helpful for challenger brands to get a presence and make other brands notice them. I think that there's different ways of selling on Amazon. So anybody can start as a seller. But for pet food, because the bulk of the weight of the product, the fees are actually really high. So you end up not making any money. So that was a blocker for us. And we had to work to drive a presence with our own website and go to all of the cat and dog shows across the country, which there are cat and dog shows every weekend, before we could get in front of the buyer and say, please invite us to the Vendor Central portal.
Yeah. It is. It's one of those things, isn't it, with D2C that I'm learning as well, that it's a bit like how far do you want to go down the rabbit hole to understand each and every bit of it? Just, so tell us a little bit about your team, you and Jack, and what you do. And at your team weekly meetings or monthly meetings, whatever, how do you prioritize where to put your focus? And we haven't even talked about the category segmentation yet, which I'd love to, but just talk to us a little bit about the team and how you prioritize your focus, given that there is so many new channels that you're getting to grips with, and a lot of the market isn't, or the future market potentially isn't in the major mults the way it used to be.
So meetings, I'll start first. We've just put in a weekly meeting. It's been going for about 5 weeks. Up until that point, we've been very much an oral company. And it's a stark contrast to my career where we had meetings every single day and so much structure. There's 5 of us now. So it's Jack and myself. Jack tends to manage the sales side. I manage the marketing and brand strategy. Tash was our third employee, and she looks after all of the wonderful things you see on social media and all our digital advertising. And then we brought in 2 other guys to help manage our operations. We're very much hands-on, so we still fill all of our direct orders from our office/warehouse. So, which a lot of people don't realize, but it's allowed us to understand the pain points for our customers when they get the product, what experiences they're expecting, and really sell them, what makes Scrumbles the choice for their pet and different things that we're doing.
So, okay. So, wow. So you're at that beautiful point where you're actually doing some great figures in terms of market performance, market sales value, but there's only 5 of you. That's nice. And your growth plans then for the next 3 years, I mean, what channels are you seeing that growth coming from?
So all channels are growing really strongly for us. We're in triple digit growth across our different channels. International is a new area for us. So pre-Brexit, we had a small European business. We're just finalising setting up our European warehouse so that we can kickstart that off again.
Oh, that's great.
That'll be a big kind of growth area for the business. But we've only just gone into the world of grocery. Other grocers are starting to talk to us. Fingers crossed, you'll find Scrumbles in more places soon.
So you've got huge headroom with such a strong market sales base already. Well done. It's really impressive. It really is
a difficult journey. I think the first 6 months, I wanted to go back to my old job because you face so much rejection, I think, at the beginning, because everybody has a great idea and, you touched it on already, but there are so many pet brands out there. So when you speak to a retailer, they always say, oh God, not another pet brand.
So let's talk about that. Try and describe the category, because I'm trying to make sense of the fact that one aisle represents the entire diet for a species, whereas the rest of the supermarket is, loads of aisles for us as humans. And there seems to be this like matrix of whether it's health or age or, private label premium. And it's like a multi-dimensional matrix. How do you make sense of that with your analytical mind?
Yeah. So, when we looked at where do we fit in the category, we could see that we weren't going to compete on the mass side because we wanted to choose, more expensive ingredients. So that was always going to drive us into the premium world. Within the premium world, you have super premium, which is about 20% of the market, and then premium, which is 30%. And that's the fastest growing area. So nutritionally, pet parents are becoming savvier and trading up mass people into, into the more expensive products because they can see the benefits to their pets and the improvements in the longevity of their lives.
Yeah.
We have positioned ourselves to just do things slightly differently. So talk about gut health and make those decisions around environmental impact, because we know that that's important across all categories and to our millennial customers. I think the majority of brands that exist have always spoken to a slightly older customer, and they're only just starting to talk to that younger consumer. And even though there are so many pet brands out there, 80% of them are owned by Mars and Nestle. So in terms of those independent challenger brands, there's very few of us.
Okay, so even Lily's or somebody like that is owned by a big company.
Lily's is owned by Nestle, yeah.
Wow, okay. And Fourth Glade, is that still
That's owned by a private equity company.
Oh,
so
okay.
that was bought a few months ago.
Okay, so authenticity and, still connection to the founders and the real story is something that you guys have. So, as an asset. You started this because you were dealing with bad poos, right? And your whole formulation is around making pretty poos. You go and you talk to the buyers, or you start getting traction online. What was the moment when you realized that this was going to work in terms of the B2B bit? Who said yes? Who sat up and listened? And then what were the indications for you that you kind of could take a little breath, a little sigh of relief?
I'm not sure I'm at that stage yet, but the first retailer that said yes was not the first to have Scrumbles listed, and it was Fetch. And I remember the meeting because my voice was breaking and I could feel the nerves and I could hear the nerves in Jack's voice. And the buyer was like, Yeah, I'm going to give you a go. I like the story, so we'll do it. And once we launched, we had nothing back from him. No emails. We were chasing. We were calling. Absolutely nothing. So Jack ended up actually driving to the offices and sat down in the waiting room until the buyer came down to leave, so that we could speak to him and say, "Remember us? You said yes. When are we going to list?"
Okay.
But, I think, it was really, Sainsbury's has been a huge change for us. The first buyer actually said to me that we had nothing unique about our brand and it wasn't going to work. So, well done for everything that you've done, but I would probably advise you not to continue. And that was a hard bit of feedback to take. And like I said,
is that not just a strategy though? Is that not just a negotiation strategy?
But it was really harsh. And
I can imagine.
But as soon as that buyer moved on, we reached out to the new buyer, and they actually gave us a chance to speak to them, and really bought into the story and understood that us millennials are taking over the world, and we want different things to the generation above us. So that was the first yes. They very much saw us as a cat brand, which has been something that we've had to fight against, to say that no, we're here for cats and doggies, and we share a lot of data to show that actually our sales are equally balanced. So most of the brands out there, so you mentioned Lily's before, they are a dog brand. 80% of their sales will be from the dog side, and that's true of all of our competitors. But we've struck a really strong balance of speaking to parents for cats and doggies.
Okay, that's a really interesting. So not only in terms of, I'm imagining I'm a buyer here and I'm thinking, okay, so there's someone who can deliver, I can be confident in them delivering into both segments and talking about gut health in both segments in a coherent way. And that is a point of difference for you in terms of your trade customer proposition.
Yeah, exactly. And I think more and more households are having both cats and doggies. So intrinsically, there's more value to be had from a brand that talks to both of those parents.
Okay. Amazing. So talk to us about what it is like working with your husband.
It's awful. No, I absolutely love it. It's overwhelming. I think we've been together for a number of years, and we've learned a lot about our strengths and what we don't do so well. And we are very different. I'm a night owl. I'm an awful morning person. Jack is brilliant in the morning. He gets me out of bed every single day. But it does mean that I suddenly have all this energy in the evening. Just as he's falling asleep, I'm like, oh, what if we were to do this with Sainsbury's? Or, have we thought about this?
Yeah.
We're learning to compartmentalize work and, strike that work-life balance. And growing the team has been really helpful. So for the first 2 years, it was just the two of us. And then bless Tash, she was the third wheel for about 6 months before we grew the team slightly more. As we develop the team, we're getting more time to focus on ourselves as a husband and wife, and our date nights are not just cat and dog shows now.
Do you ban yourselves from talking about it, and then basically lapse after about 4 minutes?
I've tried to implement rules of no work talk after 9 p.m. and I break it every single day.
Doesn't work. At least you're not in the position I'm in, whereas my husband and myself couldn't be more different. I mean, he's a kind of an artist and a scientist and all these things. And he just thinks business is, kind of not really the force for good that it pretends to be, and that it's all a load of wank, basically. Excuse my bad language. And so if I start talking about work, he goes like this, sorry, you lost me there. So at least you get to talk to someone who's most of the time going to be receptive, because they have to be, right? That's got to be a bonus. I know we've only got 10 minutes left. You've had a really illustrious career on the way up to this. And I always feel slightly bad, when I have people like you on the show who've worked for amazing companies and had wonderful bosses. You were in Bear for ages, weren't you?
Yeah, I worked with some of your previous guests.
Yeah. Did you work for Giles?
I did. Giles was my mentor for a number of years.
And Ishan?
Ishan was my boss. He was a great boss.
Who else?
I worked with Ben Veer.
You worked at Ben. And I think, God, if I was in the scaling startup community in the UK right now, it would make me feel really intimidated that all these people are doing so well, because I think I'm never going to have a chance, But you're saying that actually it's blooming difficult even if you have that experience. How do you make sense of that? How do we all make sense of that? You just have to, I suppose, get out there and do it and learn on the way, no matter what experience or background you have.
You've got to be tenacious, and you just have to persevere through all the rejection. If you think you've got a product which people are receptive to, and there's an opportunity in the market, I think you just have to continue and stand the test of time until there will be that buyer that gives you the chance. Or the beauty of the online world and direct to shopper or consumer allows you to prove the worth of your product and business idea.
Yeah. Now, the last thing, actually, I've just remembered, the one thing I really wanted to talk to you about was raising funds, right? Raising investment. Are you on that path? Where are you on that?
So we raised funds with angel investors early on, and that was, again, completely new. When you work in the blue chip companies, you don't see that side of business. So it was quite strange to go up to people and say, "This is what I'm doing. Give me your money." But we spoke to other people that had gone through that, and fortunately, having worked with some amazing people like Giles, the founders Hayley and Andrew of Bear were really generous with their time. They shared all the kind of pitfalls that they'd made and the things to expect. That really helped me to know what to do.
How far along the track in terms of revenue generation were you when you decided to, or when you started asking for money?
I think we'd taken in £60,000 as a business before we decided to raise some funds.
So what was the idea behind raising the funds at that point, rather than just driving sales? And I mean, what were you going to do? What were you going to do with that money, rather than just driving sales and using gross margin to fund your activity?
Well, unfortunately, one of the biggest mistakes we made, which was driven by our own experiences with our pets, was that we launched into dry pet food. So that has the largest MOQs, and it's got the biggest costs to bring that to market. So all of our funds that we required were to do with working capital, as opposed to growing the brand and investing into marketing. So that forced us to raise funds. And we very quickly realized that launching dog treats or cat treats or wet food, much smaller MOQs, much easier to do. So we expanded our range to do that.
So can I ask a question? If you hadn't made that error, learning that we all make, learning mistakes on the way, if you hadn't had to order huge volumes because you were in dry food, would you have needed that money, that raising that investment for working capital, or would you have been able to do it without raising the funds?
It's a really good question. If we'd started with, say, dog and cat treats, we would not have needed to raise funds for working capital. But it would have been a question of, do we want to go even faster, and do we want to raise funds into marketing? So it would just be a different set of circumstances, but we could have done it, just by ourselves if we'd have started that way.
How did you end up making the decision to play in dry food rather than in wet food and treats?
It was because of our experiences. So my cat, even though most cats like wet food, mine prefers dry food. So, we wanted to create a product that worked for her, because it was her problems really that led us down this path. So that just put us into the world of dry food. And it's a really hard sell to get somebody to switch across to dry food. If you try treats, it's a lot more promiscuous. You'll say, okay, yeah, I'll see if my dog or cat likes this. And even with wet food, it's just one pot for you to try. But to convince somebody to spend £12 on a bag of food or £7 on a bag of cat food, that's a much harder sell. So we very quickly realized that, we needed to find a way to get people into the brand.
I'm trying to think of the takeaway for people listening to this. If they were in a similar position before they pressed go, right? If they were to put together a little grid, and the grid kind of said, okay, what is the entry price that I'm asking a consumer to pay for the smallest bag? Are they willing to take a bet on me, when I'm a new brand in the market? Dry versus wet. What is the minimum order requirement, dry versus wet? What is the profitability, dry versus wet? If you'd done that evaluation grid up front, would you have made a different decision?
I would like to say yes, although I would still want to launch with dry food because it was for my pets.
And for your pets, yeah.
That's the problem. I think, what I probably would have done differently is launched into treats or wet food sooner.
Right,
so that we had that lower price point to entice
for
customers
trial
to try the food, or try the treats, so that we could get that time speaking to them. There are a lot of times where Jack and I were at a dog or cat show where we were standing in the sunshine for 8 hours and only spoke or sold to 5 people. And that was really hard because the dry food was so much more expensive. But as soon as we launched the treats, and that happened at Crufts, it completely changed the way shows went for us, because everybody wanted to try the treats and then talk to us as well.
That's really interesting. And I'm thinking as you're talking, I can't think of any category off the top of my head where playing in most of the product format segments is so important. Well, maybe chocolate. So think for example, dairy, right? Yogurts. Okay. I don't necessarily have to play in all of the formats as a brand in order to touch all of the market or touch enough of the market, right? But in dogs, in pet food, sorry, I keep saying dogs, in pet food, it seems really important that because some people are dry food eaters and some people are dry food feeders and some people are wet food feeders, that you kind of have to almost have a portfolio approach. Is that true in order to get some traction?
And a lot of our customers like to mix it up. So they feed both dry and wet, and they fall in love with the brand. And they say, I feed dry food. When will you make a wet food for me? And we've had that. We track all of our customer requests, and we've got a really nice panel of customers who will test all of the innovation. We let them decide what should we bring out next. That's great because it gives us that validation that the product's going to work as well.
Are listeners allowed to sign up for that, or is that something you recruit for?
They'll all be recruit on Instagram all the time.
You recruit on Instagram. Okay, well, that's really good to know. So people can follow you on Instagram, follow Scrumbles on Instagram, and they can potentially become testers for your brand. Because I know most of the listeners do have pets and would love to try. Listen, that was just a wealth of learning for us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on today. I know it's 11 and you have a hard stop for one of your calls. Thank you so much, Naisha.
Yeah, thanks for having me.